Hi everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and on this episode of Wandering DMs, we have a double shot of special guests. We have both Jim Davis and Jonathan Pruitt, who are, of course, our co-hosts and co-creators of WebDM, the emergent world-building video and podcast series, which we are huge, huge fans of. Jim and Jonathan, Pruitt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. You know, before we get started, I should say that Jim and Pruitt have previously been on the Wandering DMs channel twice, and you guys, we've been graced with their presence as a team on the Big Bad last year, and they also joined us for the Tomb of Rahotep live play on Halloween. So this is the first time that we've actually met you guys on the talk show when we're not in the same characters. So it's nice to meet you like this. Yeah.
I think I've been on once before by myself.
Oh, right. Right.
It was after Emma. Emma was on. That was when I was like, oh, wait, those Wandering DMs, not the other one. You know. Yeah. It was like, she kept saying, "Be Wandering DMs." I was like, oh yeah, I know that guy from Twitter.
Yeah.
And then I completely was like, oh yeah, there's also the other one. Anyway, glad to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, the secret truth is actually I think there's three of us, but
really?
Yeah, we're on good terms with them all, so we're happy to share handles.
You never know who the real one is.
That's right.
But yes, Dan, it is nice to be on the show where you're not trying to kill us. So
I don't know how weird that is. Maybe you've gotten used to that, Pruitt, and maybe it's extra weird that I'm not antagonizing you as much.
Oh, don't worry. I expect it.
So, of course, the reason that we got to have Jim and Pruitt on the show today is that you guys have just recently started a Kickstarter for the first product in a new series I think you're planning called Worlds of WebDM. And this book that you're rolling out is called Weird Wastelands, which is, I think, a toolkit for adventuring in places that have been scoured by evil magical energies. You guys basically completely smashed through all the stretch goals, all the initial stretch goals just in a couple of hours on Wednesday. So we are really interested in hearing what the backstory of that product is. Tell us more about what the product is in general.
Ooh. Okay. All right. So I'll get this one. It's a toolkit book, and in many ways, it's sort of like a supplement for 5th edition that we've been waiting for a while now, and haven't quite seen, in its entirely like the way we want. And the idea is that it's a big toy box toolkit, whatever you want to call it. A book full of stuff for you to run games in this sort of implied setting, and using everything we know about using encounter tables and equipment lists and background features and sort of those emergent elements of D&D that make for such satisfying gameplay to like embed the tools that we're giving you with enough context and story potential so that when you use them, you have a really rich, engaging sandbox game that embraces this sort of weird post-apocalyptic science fantasy aesthetic.
It's interesting that you say that because, of course, just 1 week ago we had James Malashevsky on to talk about injecting sci-fi in your fantasy games, and he has this whole thesis that I thought was really interesting that he refers to as secret sci-fi of settings that appear totally fantastical to begin with, and then you scratch the surface and you discover that some of the things that looked magical turn out to be some science fiction. So it's interesting that you just let drop. I don't know if you were supposed to keep that secret, Jim, but it's interesting that let drop that you're also thinking about the same kind of embedded or buried sci-fi bits in your Weird Wastelands product. How much of that is the undergirding? Is that just like a little side spice, or was that really something you wanted to dig into there?
Well, I mean, Pruitt and I are both fans of science fantasy, and for me it was one of those genres of literature that like I came into and sort of discovered along with the retro clones and those early OSR days where it's like everybody's blogging about the the stuff that D&D has forgotten or shed and you know, sort of used to have. And I found it like such a invigorating and you know, just exciting genre of play where it's like, is it magic? Is it not? Is it, you know, where is this a piece of technology? It's like the ambiguity of it is what I love. And the fact that you can have, you know, sort of like Sword and Planet style adventures one day, and then, you know, somewhere else you're having a different kind of sort of like maybe more Sword and Sandal type adventure or Sword and Sorcery. Like the ability to play in all of these different imaginary, I don't know, I'm going to get really weird. This is the weekend and I'm all heady, so it's going to be vague. Like, but the ability to get into these like imaginary spaces of play that aren't just waddle and daub taverns and you know, like knights and you know, orcs and goblins, but like something different and new so that it's familiar. It's still D&D. I don't want to make something completely different, but it's different. And that difference allows us to do a lot of things that I think you couldn't necessarily get away with in more traditional fantasy game.
Yeah, I think anybody who has listened to us for more than like 3 episodes, like we talk about science fantasy a lot, and going back to like Jack Vance and all that old stuff before, you know, the great Tolkien came and brought the hammer down on science fantasy, and forever it was shorn in two fantasy and science fiction. But like when I think about like, you know, the weird Wastelands, I love that like the new He-Man cartoon just came out, or the trailer for the new He-Man. Like I'm just like, yes, we have arrived in the right moment. Like this is exactly what should be. You know, the stars are aligning, so to speak. So yeah, it's just great to finally like just throw everything, the kitchen sink, you know, the phased arrays, you know, everything.
Awesome. In terms of that ambiguity you're talking about between like, is it fantasy or is it you know, is it magic or is it technology? I'm curious, in the book, how much do you resolve that, or are you just presenting a variety of options for DMs to play with?
Well, can we answer all? Like, there's definitely things that are like, okay, this is magic. Like, we don't want to make it so alien and different that it's a huge hurdle for DMs to incorporate this. Because one of the things we want is like, they can make a whole campaign setting out of this, or this can be just like a region of their world for a few adventures. Like, they don't want to let the party have a laser rifle forever. Once is okay, you know, and so like we want to embrace the ambiguity of it as much as possible, but there are going to be times where it's like, no, this is a spell, this is like traditional D&D stuff, you can use comprehend languages to read the writing on it, and or, you know, this is a summoned creature that's bound to an object, but then there's other times that I definitely want to be like, this is a piece of technology. Like what we want to do, and one of the things I was inspired by is like include language and descriptors for the DMs to use so that they don't have to come up with that ambiguity on their own. So that there's like, how about just like a list of adjectives, words, descriptors, like of things to use, you know, instead of golem, it's a automaton or a construct or something like that, you know, instead of a robot rather. And so we want them to be able to adjust that on their own and to have what they need to do that. So yeah.
I like that a lot, and obviously, I think a number of things in a number of places in the product, you're reskinning or redefining classic monsters, which I think is really clever. I remember there was a really old Dragon magazine article that did that, of just like for every monster, it gave a big list of alternative names, and it's funny how much traction you can get out of that. Of just use a different name, and all of a sudden the players are filling in, you know, in their minds a whole bunch of extra stuff for you. With the power of that different name. So I think that's a really powerful technique. Really interesting.
Definitely.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Let me, thinking of different names and stuff like that. So you mentioned Jack Vance, which makes me think of linguistic flourishes. What other pulp literature or traditions or inspirations was running around your guys' mind for this particular set of themes?
You want to take this one, Pruitt? I will take up all the talk loud.
Oh no, I talk good, man. Yeah, when it comes to like where my head's at, I have a tendency to lean more into like television and film as opposed to novels. But I mean, you know, when you think about like blasted wastelands, like there's just a slew. You just take your pick. Like, what do you want? Do you want Dune? Do you want Mad Max? Any of them? But really, like, you know, Fury Road is amazing as far as just like thinking of just like world building and like what's it like to live in the shadow of shattered like technology and society. But I'm like, I just rewatched Total Recall last night and just realized like, wow, this Total Recall, wow, this is just literally Dune on Mars with air instead of water. And, you know, so like, I just, I like sticking in like shows like that because it lets me just like take one little image and then just like come up with an idea for something. Or like I created a monster last night while watching Total Recall, just like, oh, that's freaking cool. That's cool, you know. And so like you know, draw inspiration from where it is. Like I read so many like role-playing books now. Like my actual like fiction reading has declined over the last few years, sadly. I mean, it's just kind of like a side effect of just like I've so much, you know what it's like, because we're supposed to be talking, you know, intelligently about this this hobby that we all play. And so yeah, like I like a good anything that I can put on in the background. But there's been a lot of I'll say this, there's been a lot of X-Men, there's been a lot of Invincible recently for very particular reasons. Because I have been working on the Scion, so like I've been trying to like stay in things that have like some version of psionics in it. So bumping around from like Clone Wars to different parts of Star Wars, and just keeping my headspace kind of there. But you know, everybody has their own.
I got two follow-up questions. questions. One is which Total Recall?
Yeah,
the original, man, the original.
Okay.
All right,
the
correct.
original.
Right, 1 point for Pruitt. Second question.
Open your
It's entirely not antagonistic, just so you know. Second question. Our really good patron Joshua mentioned you were talking He-Man and stuff like that. You mentioned Thundar the Barbarian, and we had a friend that was just such a huge fan of Thundar. Did you guys watch that at any point?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Thundar's amazing.
Thundar's in there. So Saturday morning cartoons in general, just for me, like the attitude of a Saturday morning cartoon, as I remember them from being a kid, is what I want to capture. Anything goes sort of mindset, and for me, that is tempered with and sort of like keeps a rein on the gonzo by saying like, well, let's also take it seriously. Like if you're going to introduce this thing, then you can just, you know, introduce it on the fly, introduce the fact that there's advanced technology or whatever, or that there were ancient aliens in your D&D world or whatever, you know. But not to do it flippantly, or to do it sort of like in a way that says, it doesn't matter that this happened, or it doesn't matter. Like, no, it matters. Take it seriously. We want it to be serious. In fact, that sort of like attitude of taking it seriously is where I'm coming from personally with how I'm drawing on the inspirations, because to me, like, He-Man and Masters of the Universe is definitely an inspiration. The Mad Max series, like all of them, inspiration. Adventure Time would be another sort of like cartoony element to it. I like the whimsy or the feel of it. But what I'm really drawn from inspiration-wise are other D&D settings that have introduced an idea and either went a different direction with it or didn't take it far enough, or it was only like a limited part. So like Dark Sun is a big inspiration. Right. Like the idea that this is just a terrible place, that this just, you know, this planet, this world has been rendered, you know, virtually uninhabitable by the use of magic. Like that was one idea that I really wanted to incorporate, but in a completely different direction than the way they went with like preserving and defiling magic. That ours is just like, what if you took a more, say, you know, like a route from Eberron where, you know, the material aspects of magic use can be industrialized. And eventually you can have magic use on a mass scale. Like, surely that's not good, right? Like, typical D&D world, we're talking medieval levels of magic use where it's like, okay, you know, an individual wizard or magic user might be corrupted by this or have something terrible happen to them, but it doesn't exist on a scale yet to, like, really affect the environment or society. But what if you started getting magic that did? and you start having magic that's like continent-wide or worldwide. And to take that, further inspiration from Eberron, the Mournland is one. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with Eberron, but like there's that part of the map where there was this, century-long arcane war that lasted between these 5 nations, and one of them is just like wiped out. It's a magical wasteland, and no one quite knows why. And I was always like, the Mournland's cool. That's my favorite part of this setting, 'cause it's like the way it's described is like, oh, you can come across this field and you can witness like a permanent illusion of what it was like for these people to perish in an instant. Because it's just it's a psychic imprint of just over and over again this thing happens, or like, these people or beasts or whatever that are still here have been warped and changed by the magic used, or everyone in this city was petrified at once. Just the way there was like magic run amok and on a scale that could cause societal and ecological collapse. Like that's an idea that I worked in a personal game after we had a TPK at the end of a campaign and the bad guys won, and it was like, gosh, that would mean that the sun's blotted out because the vampire drow won, and next campaign this place is a frozen hell world, and everybody has to cluster around geothermal vents, in the crust to like stay warm, and thankfully because of magic they can eat. And like that was a campaign that I ran like 15 years ago. Like
it's been a while. It's been a while. Like,
but it's like the earliest moment I can. Right? Yeah, third
bias
is the earliest moment I can remember thinking about this, and like there's direct lines of inspiration that go all the way back for that long about like taking some of this cataclysmic magic that goes on in a D&D world seriously, and like what happens if the bad guys win and they like become a psychic super god, or they blot out the sun or crack the earth in half, or that's what Weird Wastelands is about, is living and playing in the aftermath of that.
I was going to ask, it's interesting because I was going to ask how much of these ideas came from actual play or got used in campaigns or games, because I think Paul and I both find products that come out of actual play you can tell the difference. It's so much richer and deeper than something that was just, get it on the market, get on DM's Guild in like 5 days or something like that.
Right.
And I very much sympathize with a 20-plus year development cycle.
Yeah.
And
a lot of it is. Yeah.
When I was reading it, I totally got Mournlands. I totally got Dark Sun. And the other thing for old school D&D products was the known worlds, which was the campaign setting for D&D Basic back in the 80s. There was the known world setting, and they had an area called the Broken Lands, which I think in later iterations they explained in terms of a techno artifact accident, and they actually tied it into Dave Arneson's Blackmoor setting, which was supposedly the ancient past of that world. And right off the bat, Dave Arneson, before D&D was even itself published, was working in techno themes and accidents and ancient artifacts and the City of the Ancients and things like that. So it's a wonderful legacy and pedigree to dig into.
Yeah, it was reading through when Necromancer Games republished Wilder Lands of High Fantasy, and that was the first hex crawl I ever came across, and just like I spent days just pouring through those books cover to cover, and would come across a hover sled just abandoned and sitting there like, wait a minute, this thing started because of aliens, and it was just like, at first I was like, how very dare they, how can they not have traditional elves and whatever. But the more I played in it, and then this game that ended in the TPK, and sort of taking the consequences seriously and realizing that like there was this tradition of mixing science fiction and fantasy, and like how all the other media that I enjoy is mixed. Like all of those are inspirations that are going into this, and like it's one of a series that we're doing. Obviously, we want to do more of these, but this one's definitely the Dark Sun inspired version of a D&D setting.
Great.
Roller. Don't worry. There's some Western mixed in there too. I mean, I think to me it's pretty prevalent in the. If you look at the cover, there should be Western vibes. Like,
Yes, that's deliberate.
Fantastic. So, of course, Pruitt's responding to a question by Roller there on our live chat right at the moment, asking for. He's hoping for. He's going to chip in for Weird Wastelands, but he's hoping for Weird West in there. So the answer is yes. So on that point, we ought to talk more about the product, actually, right? About your guys' Kickstarter. So it's listed as being created by Jim and Pruitt and Emma, who is the CEO of WebDM, and we're also huge fans of Emma, of course. And then it's co-produced by an outside firm, if I'm recalling, and maybe you can tell us who else is involved with it as far as artists and forward and things like that.
Yeah, we've got 2C Gaming is sort of taking on a lot of the ancillary aspects of the project, although they'll be helping us design and write and that as well. In that, we're working with Celeste Konowich. She's done a lot of stuff for 5e out there for DM's Guild and in other outlets. Just had her own successful Kickstarter for Venture Maidens come out.
Maidens, yeah.
Yeah, it's been great working with her because she has just like, we'll come to her with like ideas for like, okay, we want it to do this, and we want like, this is how I would run it at my table for myself. Off of this Post-it note. That's not going to fly for a product. How can I put that into something, or how can we do this thing that we want to do in an elegant way, in a way that's maybe something 5th edition players haven't seen. But it's not just Celeste. We've got editors, and they've got a whole stable of artists that they've got on board. And then we managed to snag a forward from Monty Cook, because we had written a forward for his Arcana of the Ancients, which is in a similar kind of like science fantasy. Turns out ancient aliens were on your fantasy world all along. Here's how you can incorporate that kind of vibe. And we were like, it'd be great if we could just get a nod. Because I would say that we're certainly compatible.
We love
with each
Monty
other
Cook
if you're
so
a fan
much.
of one.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. So I can't avoid mentioning how much we love Monty Cook, and we had Sean Reynolds, who works with Monty, in season 2 to talk about exactly that. The Ancients product we had Sean Reynolds talking about last time. So viewers can go see that if they want to dig in more from Monty Cook Games. Actually, so great person to partner with.
Really cool. There's a lot of cool stuff in that book. It's certainly in the same spirit. But yeah, we're. I'm way off in the weeds over here, I'm sure. But yeah, so this is our first Kickstarter, so we wanted to work with someone who had a record. We'd freelanced with 2C Gaming before. Pruitt and I and Emma, we all worked on a couple of their epic level books, and then I did some other monster design. But
also the TPK Bestiary Volume 2.
TPK
some monsters for that.
Yeah. So they've got a bunch of 5th edition products out there. They're all great. They're outstanding. And so we're really, really happy to be working with them on this one.
Awesome. Great. Maybe you can tell our viewers a little bit more about some of the exciting extras and stretch goals or other stuff that's coming up that they can get if they join the Kickstarter.
Yeah. You want to take this one, Pruitt?
Yeah, I mean, wait, has the workbook has been? We've passed that stretch goal, right?
Yeah, I'm a professional. I have the webpage up. Yes.
Yeah, I just need to scroll down. The workbook is something that we're really excited about, having like an actual DM's workbook. So when you are incorporating elements or creating elements for your game, you have somewhere to like jot that down, have hex maps in there to write your own maps and like sections to write, player stats and stuff to keep anything you need to keep up with when you're using elements from the book. Just to doodle all over this, this is yours. Also, I can't wait to get a flask. That's part of it's part of the collector's thing. It just looks so freaking cool, and just the idea of a flask in a wasteland is just it's top notch for me. But
there's your Western theme right there if you need it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll make a stretch goal like a spittoon or something. I don't know.
I might need that.
But also we've got our quest deck that was unlocked. So we'll just have a deck full of just here's a little quest you can go on, but all again tied back into everything that's in the book. So it's all kind of self-referential, and the way we're going to have the book formatted. We learned a lot from like Monty Cook Games and having all of the little annotations in the side, so when you're reading something, you're like, oh, that rule, huh? And you look to the side, yeah, this rule on page 245. So you can flip right to it, and just the way a book is laid out is so important, and we just want to make sure that people can get to the information that we're trying to provide. That's like one of the highest, the best goals that we can achieve, I think, is having the information in easy to get and concise.
That's great. The book looks great, and now that you mention it, I actually can see bits of Monty Cook, advice in the way that it's laid out. As a matter of fact, now you mention it, because he's very, very mindful about that, and that's a good track to be on.
It's why I fell in love with that system, the Cypher system in general. and all of those books, they're just so easy to read and to retain, and so it's just kind of like, well, why? Let's not make others' mistakes. Let's just follow the path that leads us here. I can't wait to work on War Wagons. I'm just going to say that right now. That's a stretch goal that got unlocked because we've been kicking around some very interesting ideas and having some giggles. So anyway.
I like the fact that your Kickstarter is exploding so fast that you literally mid-show here have to be mashing the F5 button.
Yeah. Which was
mid-show in order to figure out where you currently are, because from minute to minute, different stretch goals are getting unlocked while we're here.
Yeah, there's a reason we're hiring somebody to help run the Kickstarter, because I would just be overwhelmed if it was just me.
Yeah. But we've already unlocked an actual play that we will do using this material to show you how to incorporate that. Jim, do we know who's going to run that game yet? Have we discussed that?
I mean, I'm sure. I probably will. I'll probably run that one.
Oh man,
that's what I was. That's what I was assuming. This was one of those that I was like, oh, we're doing one of those. All right.
Ooh, can I play in it?
You can consider. Think about possibly co-DMing it. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Sure, it's a possibility.
Tell us how to do our job. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, point to Jim. All right, I'll give a point to Jim for that. Very nice. Good try. Well done.
There it is.
Oh, that's great.
And I also, the one thing that I really like there about features were I love the custom dice and the dice bags, actually.
Yeah.
The custom Wasteland dice, I was like, I tend to be really high threshold to want new dice, but I really love the design of these, honestly.
Yeah, I like them too. They're looking nice. A lot of the add-on stuff, the sort of the extras, is like. Apart from the flask was really like, we can have a flask. Like we have to have a flask. Right?
Yes.
The idea of having physical things for when you're able to get back with your friends and game in person. That's sort of like driving like the quest deck and the dice of just being able to say, okay, well, we're playing this game right now. Okay, I'm going to use these dice. This is what we can have. I'm going to keep I don't want to let slip anything I'm not supposed to yet, but having things that you can use at the table and to enhance your game, I really like that. I love handouts. I love tokens. I love cards. I love chits and maps and minis and terrain and all that. So we wanted as much of that as we could get in there without it being, like a 500-pound box that costs, too much, like something that's still affordable, reasonable, and not too cluttered. Yeah.
Brilliant. We love that stuff too. So I think that's particularly as we transition back to actually playing with people live. That's that really kind of touches my heart. Actually, that's a good time for that. Honestly.
Yeah, nice. It's going to be like another. We're looking for fulfillment for like the physical products by say sometime around the end of the summer or early fall next year. And, you'll have the PDFs long before then, but it's still going to be a while. So by then, we hope that everybody's back and sort of getting into a groove of playing in person again. And so being able to open a box that looks like you dug it up from the ground, and have a deck of cards to go well, this is what may be available in this particular settlement or whatever, this part of the wasteland. Here's some things you can do. You're going to use the dice, everything else, just gives a tactile sort of enhancement to the game that
super.
I'm excited about. Yeah.
Super. All right, so I want to dig into some of the details that you guys did publicize with the sample PDF text that people, I think, can get online at the moment. And so you've got new subclasses, you've got new monsters, you've got magic items, you've got, encounter areas and things like that. So I was surprised to see, like, one of your highlight subclasses was a new circle for Druids, because initially I was like, well, it's a wasteland, that's not the place for Druids. So maybe tell us why you wanted to highlight Druids, and what is your Druid's special abilities, and how does it fit into the theme of the Wastelands?
Yeah. To me, a Druid's a real asset in a game like this. In third edition, I played a Druid in sort of a Dark Sun inspired game, and I did it deliberately to be like, no, I want to be at home out here. I want to be able to like deal with the challenges, and so that's kind of the design philosophy that we have with all of our subclasses, which is not to negate the tools that a subclass would give you to overcome parts of the wasteland, but to like lean into it. And also the wasteland's like more than just sandstorms and temperature, so for the Druids in the wastelands, I wanted to like capture that connection that Druids have to nature magic in the natural world, and like what's it going to be like to be a Druid after an environmental collapse and cataclysm. Like nature's still there. There's still plants, there's still animals, there's still some life left. Deserts are surprisingly full of life, except for the most extreme of them. And so like at the same time, this is a person who has a spiritual connection to the supernatural embodiment of the place that was harmed and is still harmed. And so the Circle of a Broken Land like is a barbarian inspired Druid that sort of like that connection, that primal connection to supernatural nature has become a source of pain and anguish, and like spirits of nature, cry out to these Druids, the ghosts of dryads and things like that, demanding justice. And so we want a Druid that can like just lay a beat down on the people who are either making it worse, maybe perpetuated this cataclysm in the first place, or who might just deserve it in sort of a rough justice wasteland kind of way. So we have a melee Druid, a home for your shillelagh finally in 5e, especially if you didn't like a bunch of gross spores and fungus with your Druids. But the idea there is that as they sort of advance in level and become more at home in the wasteland, they can perform a ceremony that allows them to sort of propitiate or appease the wasteland spirits, that gives them certain benefits. Like, you don't have to drink while you're here. You can just eat gravel and sand and dirt, or like you trading hit dice for being able to reduce exhaustion levels. Would be another one of those, because exhaustion is going to be a big part of dealing with wasteland hazards. They're good outdoors, but their primary focus is that of sort of like nature's avenger, that they're here to sort of be an expression of the pain that the primal forces of this land suffer because of the cataclysm.
I have to say, good on you for getting ahead of the curve here, because I had a personal chuckle over seeing Druid stuff in there, because I'm reminded immediately of many, many years ago in the second edition era, playing in a Dark Sun campaign and bringing with me the Complete Druid's Handbook. And let me tell you, the Desert Druid from the Complete Druid's Handbook kind of breaks Dark Sun horribly. So good on you for thinking of the Druid's place in this kind of world. I think that's pretty clever.
Like the Druid and Ranger were two that I wanted to pay special attention to. Ranger's going to be a scavenger, sort of a little bit of a artificer, a little bit of a like that. What I'm going for with the Ranger is that moment in the beginning of Force Awakens when like Rey is scavenging from that Imperial Star Destroyer in the middle of a desert. Like, it might not read as much as a spaceship in Weird Wastelands. It could be a number of things, but that moment of someone who's out there alone, contending with the wilderness and what's in it, which Base Ranger already does, but also able to like take advantage of the scrap and debris that they find, and capturing what little magic remains in it was important. But for both of them, I didn't want someone who plays a ranger or a druid to feel like we were taking something away.
Yeah.
And I think the knee jerk with a lot of like DMs who want to make wilderness survival and exploration and travel like difficult or challenging or just like an aspect of their games are like, well, we're going to take these spells away. This feature isn't as good as it used to be. And like there's some of that. We'll provide variants. We're going to, have a variant of Natural Explorer for rangers that doesn't like auto success of, their navigation. But I also wanted to take seriously that people that play rangers and druids and take spells like Goodberry or Tiny Hut or something as they want to be good in those moments. They want to have food to eat. They want to have shelter. They want to be good in the wilderness. And the design place that we're coming from is like, that's great. We don't want to tell you no. We want you to have those tools. In fact, you might need them because we created a wilderness that fights back. Like our wilderness isn't just hot temperatures and sandstorms and sort of inhospitable. It's like, it's a magical wasteland. It might change your personality. It might do things to you that are undesirable. And what we're hoping for is that they're not boring. And you might not like that they're happening. We want them to be interesting and engaging and have some element of choice. And so you're going to need those tools that Druid and Ranger and other things provide to handle these things.
That's great. So we have one of the really great pieces of artwork up from that Druid, who's the circle of the Broken Land there. And I think one of the very first, I got a very Dark Sun vibe reading that Druid subclass there. And the other thing is, of course, my last name is Collins, and my family a ways back is originally from Ireland, and close enough that when my grandfather was alive and he got angry, he like when I was a young kid, he would go, "I'm so angry, I'm going to go get my shillelagh." He would say to us. And at the time, I wasn't entirely clear what that was. I found out what that was later. It's just like what my gramp's going to get when he gets super angry. And it's pretty much the very first sidebar in the sample book here is Jim saying how much he really wanted a campaign setting that allowed the use of shillelaghs. So as far as I can tell, the whole Weird Wastelands is basically Jim working more shillelaghs into his game, which I highly respect. And I feel
from
really
humble seeds. From humble seeds. Yeah, it's a shame that there's not. I remember second edition Druid and having a lot of fun with shillelagh and being able to survive TPKs and the like because I was a Druid. So lots of love.
So you're talking about the environment's going to fight back, and about half of your sample PDF is about this really interesting encounter area, which is a toxic dump, which you refer to as the alchemical toxic sump, which is fantastic. And it's public, and I think we can kind of lift the veil a little bit on what's happening there. And so that's the result of a crash of an airship. Which is maybe magical or maybe technical, a little bit ambiguous there, but it very much feels like the old school Barrier Peaks adventure kind of popped into my head, or again Dave Arneson's City of the Ancients adventure. So you've got a downed ship and it's sprayed a whole lot of magical energy or forces out in the area, and it's now has a bunch of interesting possibilities. It's got interesting new monsters and treasures and things that are simultaneously really dangerous, or you might dig up new treasures out of there. What was some of your thought process that went into the things you're going to find in the magical toxic dump?
Yeah. Well, like we wanted locations that have story embedded in them. I think that the 5th edition's focus on story for a while threw me off because I was like, what are you guys talking about? There's the story in D&D is emergent, this. And story all over the place. And I felt like I came to a crossroads with him. I was like, I can either continue to be a grumpy grumpster about this, or I can just be like, screw it. Nobody else seems to have a clear definition for story. I don't need one either. And so for us, what we wanted is like, the locations and the monsters and everything, they are pregnant with adventure, that there's context, there's stuff there. And so we wanted a place that's not just, it's a ruin, but like to tell you a bit about why it's a ruin, how it became a ruin, and then to make sure it is interactive in a variety of ways and to present those as clearly to the DM as possible so that they can go, all right, well, I need the sump today to be a way stop and a longer journey. And so I'm not going to have an encounter there. I understand I could have there's monsters that might be there, but I don't want that. And I'm going to pick one of the less punishing effects, the contagions, for the pool, so that if they get in trouble, it's not a disaster. You know, it's not like they all have to like stand perfectly still in case they move too much that the crystals within them grow out of their body and die. You know, or it could be one where it's like, no, I want to use the Magicore. That's its lair. I want to feature this monster heavily in the game. The players are going to come to this location multiple times. We wanted to have a depth so that it facilitates those repeat visits, but that it's not so intricate or complicated that you can't just like hit it and move on and use the other stuff somewhere else.
Fascinating. And of course, so we're currently looking at the image for that Magicore monster, which I thought was interesting. So it's sort of based on a Manticore, except that it's massively been changed because it actually consumes magic. And I thought that was a really neat creature, actually. And you know, there's a lot of creatures in D&D that you like throw a spell at it and it's just canceled. But the fact that the Magicore can make use of it, and I thought what I was really kind of thrilled about was the fact that it can bite someone that currently has a magic buff and consume the magic buff through biting or licking somebody. And I thought that was actually a really clever little twist on the I'm taking away your magic bit.
I like the Magicore. It starts at it's a pun, right? That's fine. It's a magic-eating Manticore. Manticore is one of my favorite monsters precisely because it's a person head and can talk to you and mock you. And I like that it's a lion because lions are lazy and sort of like low effort predators for the most part, especially like male lions. And just sort of imagine a monster that's like physically quite intimidating for a low level party, but just can't be bothered right now to get up and fight you or try to eat you unless like, oh, you're a wizard though? Like, how many spells do you have in that brain of yours right now? And I also, from a design perspective, I wanted something that was other than like, oh, it has magic resistance, advantage to attack, or like legendary resistance and can just like cancel one of your spells entirely. I relied on like counterspell and dispel magic as sort of the features, but because the Magicore itself isn't casting a spell in those moments, its being is absorbing the magic. That's going to unlock some of its own spells, which are there to help it fly faster and mess with you in a role-playing encounter and that kind of thing. And then I just wanted it to hit like a truck, so we just sort of increased the damage on it and made it just a little bit tougher so that it could be a real challenge for a low-level party who might happen to stumble across this thing.
So I don't have the text here in front of me, but Dan mentioned a thing that I want to follow up on because I need to know the answer to this. He said that it could bite or lick. Is there a separate lick attack? There's not. There is
it can lick any magic that sticks to it off of itself. But how a DM wants to reflavor a bite attack is up to them. I'm not going to stand in anybody's way.
I mean, it is a legendary.
Manticore's tongue's pretty rough. Yeah. And then Tina, the artist, just like brought it to life. I love that picture.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's really great. That's really great.
Fantastic.
So I was reading. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say the evocative description of it doing it via a lick, and the fact that as you mentioned, Jim, that it can talk to you. So I'm just imagining it saying some really nefarious things as it stalks forward, licking its chops.
Oh, certainly. I mean, it's the same reason I included ghouls in the encounter table too, because ghouls are nice. Again, it can talk to you as it's trying to eat you, and like I just I like that. So those are why I included those.
That's fantastic. I don't think I've ever used talking ghouls in my game.
Oh my god, they have like in 5th edition at least, they've got like a 7 int that can speak common.
Never thought of that.
It's terrifying when they start talking to you.
That's great.
And that's very Lovecraftian, right? Lovecraftian ghouls. He was conversing with Randolph Carter and all that kind of thing, and when hanging out with them. So that's the thing. The thing is, I'll point out, you didn't actually literally call them ghouls in the encounter table. So personally, I was reading and it's like, oh, some weird wasteland, Dune type natives, and then the second paragraph goes, oh, and they're ghouls and they're going to paralyze you. I'm like, oh,
and they're ghouls.
I got tricked by that.
And I think there might be a rumor on the rumor chart that's like Wastelanders have a custom of like showing each other their teeth, because if they have black teeth, it means they're a ghoul or a cannibal. And so like that's another sort of like, I don't know, if you can make the connection, it's going to add to your game. If not, leaving it out isn't going to ruin anything. Is sort of why that's the approach there. Yeah.
Wow, it's really surprising how much just slightly relabeling it changes like my whole interaction with somebody shows up and then a second later, oh, they're ghouls. Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Why are they all wrapped up like that? Oh, it's sandy out here. No, they're ghouls.
There was a while where I was reading the sample and I was wondering this encounter area and the Magicore, what's the intended tier or player level? Because the Magicore is really beefy, as someone said. It's basically a monster truck, basically. Thank you, Ruler. And it wasn't until fairly late that you've got a random encounter table in there, and it says we assume that this is an area for maybe 4 PCs of the 3rd level, and I'm like, 3rd level? Jim and Pruitt are not kidding around. They are willing to
it's
throw
deadly.
real
You got to be careful around that thing.
People.
There's an iron golem too. Yeah, you got to be careful for that. But there's also like 2 dust methods. You have to spend 2 rounds roughing up before they'll run away. You know, like we wanted a wide range of possible encounters, and especially with the Magicore, like there's a lot of excuse for the DM not to go all out. Like this thing, its flaw is it's astonishingly lazy, you know. So it makes sense that maybe the first few times you encounter it, you're just talking to it, or it's just around, you know, and only later, maybe when it's most inconvenient, does it, you know, you do it, you know, go for the TPK. You make a good effort at it, and this thing will help. By 5th level, party should be able to mop the floor with it, especially, you know, it's got a lot of ranged attacks.
You know, likewise, I'll say that because Jim a while back mentioned the contagions or diseases that come out of the gunk in the toxic sump, and you were seriously not kidding around. I was very surprised. So, and for some reason we actually talk about diseases a lot on the show, in the proper way of using them, and your diseases are really lethal. They are. Yeah. How many people do you kill with that stuff? Because that stuff is enormously dangerous. I didn't think people did that in 5th edition anymore, frankly.
They don't. Not a lot of them do, and that's part of why we wanted to put it in there, because we want to. We've had enough people tell us they want things like this, that the kind of like kid gloves of a lot of the official stuff it just doesn't stick. That they have a hard time feeling like there's consequences or that something's at risk, and so we're like, well, listen, this is clearly not fluid you should be messing with, right? Like this is the sour alchemical reagents leaking up from a crash, and like it's the reason this whole place is a desert in the first place. Like if you do something as foolish enough as drink it, you don't even get a save, right? You're affected by it. And so at the same time, you could dredge it for treasure. It's valuable as an alchemical reagent, you know, once processed. You may want to push someone into it. There are some effects on there that aren't like terrible, they're just inconvenient. You know, the one that turns you into sort of like a drooling idiot while you experience visions and have your DM answer questions for you, you know, as if they were an oracle is great, but like you got to stick around that place for a while before that can wear off. So we wanted almost all of them to have an element of choice to them and to be interesting. Nothing that's like save or die, you know, nothing that's like, oh, 1 die roll and now I can't play my character anymore. So the ones that do have a chance to kill you, there's an element of choice. You know, there's like, all right, you've been infected by this thing that's going to cause crystals to grow in your joints every time you move. You could just not move and not take any damage, but then like somebody has to carry you and like, you got to ride this thing out, you know. Or the one that's like you're infected with an energy imbalance and you've got like 30 d6 of damage that is going to go off in an hour.
Yeah.
But you could, little by little, do 1, 2, 3, however many d6 you want, at your leisure, at your convenience, by yourself, in a group of enemies, next to the character who's immune to that particular energy type. I want to do all fire. I want to do all radiant, whatever. Like, you just know in an hour this is going to happen. and it's up to you as a player to like figure out how to deal with that. We didn't want it to be a death sentence. We wanted you to be able to say like, well, maybe I just do a little bit over the course of an hour and then somebody heals me up or something like that. So yeah, we wanted it to be interesting and not like something you've ever seen before.
I thought that stuff was very creative, and I my eyes really popped at the 30 dice of damage disease. And
that was Celeste. I was going to just have 10. Okay. She was like, "That's got to be 30."
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. Well, point for Celeste. Okay, that's really respectable. And the other option of having possibly no save for one of them. I mean, you guys, Jim and Pruitt, you guys are 100 times more experienced with 5th edition than I am, but like, I thought there was 5th edition D&D police that came around and took you off stage if you did a no save effect these days. Does that not that's not a thing, I guess?
I mean, the cops can show up if they want, but I've got a bug out bag and escape route, so. Yeah, I mean, presumably the intro to the book itself will have word of warning, but we wanted to present something that's like you might never have played with something like this before, and that's why we're presenting a toolkit and not an adventure path, not a setting in and of itself. It's just pick and choose at your leisure what you like. You like the arcane paroxysm, you like that, but you don't want anything else. Then maybe it's something your villain can do. They have a contagious spell slot that's going to eat up all your other spell slots, something like that. That's my favorite one personally. You see an effect that seems interesting, but you're like, oh, that's a lot. Like, 30 dice of damage, that could be a lot. But okay, 10, 5, however, it's there for you to change. Like, the DIY, change it, make something yourself is why I've stuck with this hobby as long as I have, because it offers endless outlet for creativity. And we just want to share some of that with everybody. Yeah.
That's awesome. So before we totally run out of time, there's one sidebar in there where I think Jim, you were writing, and you write, you all are going to have to wait for the book to get these sweet technomancy spells.
Yeah.
So I get it. I want to keep something behind the screen, but I mean, we're all friends here, and we can keep a secret. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the technomancy spells before anybody else knows about it.
Yeah. Do you recall what we were talking about the other day for one of them, Pruitt?
We were talking about a lot the other day for them.
The temporary conveyance.
Oh yeah, the temporary conveyance. Yeah, I could. Yeah, okay. So imagine like Tiny Hut, but just a ball of just debris and detritus that you cobble together, and it just kind of rolls, and so it's not comfortable, right? But we need to get across this desert really fast, or we are going to bake in the sun. Everybody, just hang on. And, the wizard I'm imagining is in the middle like a gyroscope. They don't move, but everybody else, or actually, I'm sorry, Pacific Rim Uprising. It's not a great movie, but the little Jaeger that rolls up in a ball and just rolls everywhere, that's like what I'm thinking. It's just like a tumbleweed of trash that just, you and like 4 people can just right across there, 100 feet around or something. But yeah, it's not going to be fun. You might have to make a save, or a con save if you go too long, or you get flung out. But I
feel like having the wizard in the center, kind of floating and thus immune to the effect, while the rest of the party is bouncing around like a crazy hamster wheel, is just delightful for creating inter-party strife. So well done.
Absolutely. Yeah. The technomancer we envisioned as being like a junk wizard. They're a junkyard wizard. That they are surrounded by the magitech artifacts of a cosmic level civilization that destroyed itself. They don't know anything about it. Nobody left, they're having to piece together their knowledge from experimentation with what they find in a ruin. And so we wanted a lot of those spells to have that kind of reckless feel to them. This is a big pile of scrap. I think I can make a golem out of it. Give me a second, and it's going to last for
like magic, like MacGyver for magic.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, and to be able to mess with and customize and sort of unlock the inherent magic that's in objects and things like that. Also, we can't use Artificer because it's not in the SRD, so we needed something that had a technological component to it, and that was another one of those like, oh man, we can't do Artificer subclass. Like, all right. Technomancer.
Yeah, but it's really dangerous out there. So something that we love from like Warhammer Fantasy role playing, you could lose a limb just like that, and so you're going to need somebody to craft you a limb out of like a couple of pieces of wood and like a ball joint and that dragon claw or whatever. Yep. Yeah, I get it for you. Just give me like 10 minutes. Just like I imagine like a mechanic at the corner, like the corner like gas station. Like, oh yeah, we'll get the part coming in. But it's going to be expensive, like that's your technomancer.
That's great. We are running close to the edge of time here, gentlemen. Is there anything about the project that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we got to before we're out?
I mean, we talked a lot about the design work I've been doing. Pruitt's been doing a lot with the Scion, and he's had his work cut out for him. But that preview is as yet not ready for release, right, Pruitt?
Yeah, it is coming soon. I'm not sure. Like, I can't remember the exact date we decided on, but a weekish away, a little bit over, maybe.
Soon.
But yeah, soon. I'm very excited. It's tough. I understand why Wizards of the Coast abandoned the Mystic and just was like, let's just do subclasses. Why not? Just screw it. So, like I said, my head has been in every kind of media that has any kind of like psionics in it or version of psionics. And so just trying to present something that is both familiar and new is a very difficult thing, especially for someone who is new to design, as I am. So I hope people like it. I really do. I think it's an interesting take on it. It is not what we're not doing spellcasting like you expect. Like, it's nothing like the other spellcasters. And it's just a scion that, if you need to, you can go really low energy pretty much all day. Like, that's what I want. I wanted a workhorse. But in the end, you can, like I want to build in there that, you can kill yourself with your own power. Like, I want that as part of the class. You can push yourself to the point in that moment when you need to be a hero and there's no one else. Guess what? Cue up the music. I need a hero. And so, like, you can do that. Like, and that's not a bug. That's a feature. So it's, again, this is all about choice. Like, it's dangerous out here, and if your story needs to end at this moment, you literally can choose that moment to be like, no,
Fifth edition's a little long in the tooth, and even for players who this is their first edition, we want to offer them a chance to stretch their legs, and having a class that can literally kill itself is one of those, like, you guys know what you're doing now. You're D&D players. You can handle this. Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. I got one last question, and it's real fast. It's both Jim and Pruitt. Pro or anti potion missability table?
Depends how many potions you drink.
Pro, yeah.
Point to Jim. The correct answer is pro. And also point to Pruitt, because actually that's a pretty good point as well.
Yeah.
I think there should be different. There should be different tables depending on how many potions you drink.
Yeah, that's what you. Yeah, you didn't realize that Pro was like Pro Plus.
You're right.
Not intense enough.
Okay, extra credit point for Pruitt. Good point. I got a lot of flavor of that from Weird Wastelands.
Yeah, I'm an enabler over here. Came to mind. Just drink another one. Just drink another one. See what happens.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if you want to check out Weird Wastelands, I'm dropping the link again into the chat. You can also, I'm sure it will be linked here in the description of the YouTube video as well. And what better way to get updates as this project proceeds than to go ahead and pledge on Kickstarter, and you'll get all the updates real time, and you can watch this amazing project take off. So check it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys.
And I guess, Paul, people should add other comments if they have things to tell us about after the show, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Leave us comments here in the YouTube video if you have further questions that haven't been answered. But again, I think the best way to get updates is to go straight to the Kickstarter.
You're right. Paul is, of course, right. Listen to Paul. Don't listen to me. Listen to Paul. Is what you should do. And if you are new to the Wandering DMs channel, don't forget that you can like, follow, and subscribe to us on a variety of different social media. We are on YouTube and Twitch and Facebook and Twitter and GitHub. And we do have the handle Wandering DMs on all of those sites. So please look for us there, and you'll get updates on future wonderful guests that we're going to have. And if we can manage to get Jim and Pruitt, maybe Emma back on at some future point, you'll find out when that's happening.
If you prefer to listen to this show in audio-only podcast format, you can get them at our website at wanderingdms.com. They're also available through various podcast carriers such as Google Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, and a few others, I think. If you're listening to this podcast from one of those carriers, please take a moment to rate and review us there on that site. That helps other users of those sites find us, and we really appreciate it.
We very much do. A couple notes on upcoming shows on Wandering DMs. The Book of War Wargaming is off for this week, but Paul is going to be back on Thursday at 8 p.m. with a interim 10 Dead Rats fill-in for a couple of weeks, where he's going to have a guest DM show up, I think, for a couple of weeks for a very special non-traditional game for a couple of weeks there, so look for that. Paul and I will be back next week, of course. Big thanks, as usual, we have to give out to the patrons, the Wandering DMs. You guys are great and make everything that we do here possible, including get wonderful guests like Jim and Pruitt here to chat with us. So if you're in a position to join our generous sponsors, please do go to patreon.com/wanderingdms, pick a tier that's appropriate for you, and you'll see a whole bunch of benefits to those tiers, such as discounts on merch, monthly behind-the-scenes videos, polls and surveys on things that you'd like to see coming up, and access to our private Discord server, including after-party chat that we have after our Sunday shows. And we'll be there in a couple minutes, and we'll have a wonderful conversation with our patrons. And maybe, if they have a couple extra minutes, maybe we'll get Jim and or Pruitt into that chat in a couple minutes for our patrons on Discord. Maybe you guys can join us then?
Yeah, definitely. Once my basement has stopped so noisy.
Awesome. So huge thanks to Jim and Pruitt. Yes, please do go follow the Weird Late Wastelands Kickstarter and back that. We are super interested to see the additional stretch goals that get rolled out, hopefully, and everything that's going so well for you guys. So Jim and Pruitt, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll get you on again sometime.
Anytime.
Thanks for having us.
Love talking to you guys.
Awesome. Don't forget, Wandering DMs, we are here every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be back next week. We hope that you'll join us then for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.